Imagine you are a Japanese pilot in 1944. You're flying through a moonless sky over the Philippines. To you, the darkness is a shield. You believe you are invisible to the American fighters below. But you're wrong. High above, a twin-tailed shadow is watching you through an electronic eye you didn't even know existed. You won't hear him until the 20mm cannons start tearing your wings off. This isn't just a story about a plane. It's about the brutal mathematics of survival. One pilot, one radar operator, and 80 minutes to stop 12 bombers from changing the course of the war. Before we reveal how Major Carroll Smith pulled off the impossible, do us a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. We're on a mission to rescue these forgotten archives from the dust, and your support is the fuel that keeps this channel flying. Ready? Let's go to Muro, December 29th, 1944. The setting for this story is Muro, on the island of Mindoro. It was December 1944, and the air was thick with humidity and the smell of aviation fuel. But more than that, it was thick with fear. For 2 weeks, Japanese bombers had been relentless. There were 334 air raid alerts in just 14 days. Imagine that for a second. That is nearly 24 alerts every single day. The American engineers were working around the clock to build airfields for the upcoming Lingayen Gulf invasion. Every time the sirens wailed, work stopped. Every time a bomb hit, the invasion was pushed back. The Japanese High Command knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just dropping explosives, they were dropping delays. They understood that if the American fighters could operate from Muro, the Japanese air superiority in the region would vanish forever. They sent everything they had: conventional bombers, kamikazes, and high-speed reconnaissance planes. We often think of World War II as a series of massive battles, but the Siege of Muro shows us the war of attrition. It was a psychological battle against the engineers. The Japanese didn't need to destroy the whole army. They just needed to break the schedule. In warfare, time is often more valuable than ammunition. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron wasn't just defending a strip of dirt. They were defending the timeline of the entire Pacific campaign. When you look at the pressure on these men, you realize that history isn't just made on the front lines, but in the logistics and the dirt of a construction site under constant fire. Enter the P-61 Black Widow. If you've never seen one, it looks like something out of a futuristic comic book. It was the first American aircraft designed from the ground up to fight exclusively at night. It was painted in a special glossy black that made it virtually invisible when caught in a searchlight. But the real magic wasn't the paint or the twin Pratt & Whitney R2800 engines producing 2,000 horsepower each. It was the SCR-720 radar. This was 1944, and these guys had a microwave pulse radar in the nose of a wooden and metal bird. While the Japanese pilots were squinting through their goggles trying to see the horizon, Lieutenant Philip Porter, the radar operator, was looking at a glowing green screen that saw through the very fabric of the night. There is a profound irony in the P-61. It was a massive aircraft with a 66-foot wingspan, yet it was the ultimate stealth fighter of its era. People often credit the atomic bomb with ending the war, but I believe it was technology like the SCR-720 radar that truly broke the spirit of the Axis. It took away their greatest sanctuary, the night. When you can no longer hide in the dark, you are never safe. That is a psychological weight no pilot can carry for long. It turned the hunters into the hunted, and the invisible bombers became sitting ducks. At 2340, Major Carroll Smith was sitting in that cramped cockpit. He wasn't just a pilot, he was a tactician. Porter called out the first contact, 180 knots, heading south. But here's where the story gets intense. There weren't just 1 or 2 bombers. There were 12. 12 bombers against 1 P-61. If Smith chased one, the others would slip through. If he moved too fast, he'd burn all his fuel. If he moved too slow, the bombs would already be falling on the men below. Smith had to calculate the intercept geometry in his head while flying through a black void. Think about the pressure on Smith's shoulders. He knew that for every bomber he missed, there was a high probability of American deaths on the ground. This wasn't a game of points. It was a game of lives. The 418th had only been at Muro for 3 days. They were the only line of defense. I find it incredible that in the heat of combat, the human brain can prioritize targets while facing its own mortality. Smith wasn't just fighting the Japanese. He was fighting a clock that was ticking down his fuel. He knew that even a single bomber getting through could mean the end of the airfield construction and the deaths of hundreds of engineers. The first kill came at 23:57. A Mitsubishi G4M Betty. The Betty was a fast bomber, but it had a nickname among Allied pilots, the Flying Lighter. It had no self-sealing fuel tanks. Smith closed to 350 yards, close enough to see the faint blue glow of the Betty's exhaust, and let out a 2-second burst from his 4 20mm cannons. The Betty didn't just crash, it disintegrated. But look at the timeline. Smith didn't stop to watch the wreckage. He immediately asked Porter for the next vector. By 0014, he found the second Betty. By 0029, he had intercepted a Nakajima Ki-49 Helen. The Helen was faster and had a dangerous tail gunner. Smith had to approach from the blind spot below the belly. This required precision flying that is hard to do in the daytime, let alone in a pitch-black sky where you can't tell the ocean from the clouds. Most pilots would have gone home. 4 kills is an incredible feat. It's nearly ace-in-a-day status in a single hour. But look at Smith's fuel, 23%. He was far below the safety margin. This is where we see the difference between a good pilot and a legendary one. Smith didn't see the mission as, how many can I shoot down? He saw it as, are there any left? He was operating on pure adrenaline and a sense of duty that pushed him past the mechanical limits of his aircraft. He knew that his fuel gauge was a countdown to a watery grave, yet he chose to continue the hunt. This next part is where the story shifts from a mission to a legend. Smith is heading home. His fuel gauges are hovering near empty, and Porter sees one more blip. This wasn't a bomber. It was a Nakajima Ki-84 Frank. The Frank was a beast. It was faster than the P-61, more maneuverable, and carried heavy cannons. This was a boss battle. If the Frank pilot had seen Smith, the P-61 would have been in deep trouble. But the Frank pilot was flying blind. He was searching for Americans with his eyes, while Smith was searching with radar. Smith dove. He used gravity to push the Black Widow to 390 miles per hour, exceeding its normal cruise speed. He emptied his remaining shells into the Frank's engine. This 5th kill is the most significant. It demonstrates the total transition of aerial warfare. The Frank was arguably the better pure fighter, but it lost because it lacked situational awareness. In modern combat, we call this the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Smith's radar allowed him to complete his OODA loop before the Japanese pilot even knew he was in a fight. It proves that in the 20th century, information became more lethal than raw firepower. It was the dawn of electronic warfare, where the pilot with the best sensors wins, regardless of the plane's agility. You'd think the story ends with the fifth kill, but the most terrifying moment was yet to come. Smith is 11 miles from the base. His fuel is at 13%. That is roughly 18 minutes of flight time. As he lines up for the runway, the kerosene lamps, the only things marking the strip, suddenly go out. Total blackout. Imagine the silence in that cockpit. No lights, no fuel, no room for error. Smith had to perform a dead reckoning landing. He used the radar altimeter to count down his height. 100 feet, 50 feet, 25 feet. He was essentially flying into a black wall, hoping the ground was where his instruments said it was. This is the ultimate test of trust. Smith had to trust his radar operator. He had to trust his engineers. And most importantly, he had to trust his machine. When he touched down on that crushed coral at 0059, he had 6% fuel left. That's about 3 minutes of life. This wasn't just luck. It was the result of 18 months of exhaustive training in Orlando, Florida. It shows that heroes aren't just born. They are forged through thousands of hours of practice. The technical skill required to land a massive twin-engine fighter in total darkness on a primitive runway with empty fuel tanks is nothing short of miraculous. Carroll Smith ended the war as the top-scoring night fighter ace of the Pacific. He had 7 kills in total, 5 of them in 1 hour and 3 minutes of combat. And yet, if you look for his name today, you won't find many statues. He didn't write a memoir. He didn't go on a press tour. He just went back to being a civilian. The P-61 full house was scrapped. The radar units were dismantled. The airfields at Muro are likely overgrown with jungle now. Why does this story matter today? Because it reminds us that history is often made by people who don't seek the spotlight. Carroll Smith and Philip Porter were a team. They were the invisible guardians. Their victory didn't just happen in the air. It happened in the fact that the invasion of the Philippines proceeded on schedule. They saved thousands of lives without ever seeing the faces of the people they protected. Every time we look at our modern world, at our GPS, our weather radar, our stealth technology, we are looking at the legacy of that December night in 1944. We are looking at the legacy of the Black Widow. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible journey. Where are you watching from today? Do you have a relative who served in the Pacific? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your family stories. We are a global community of history lovers, and your stories keep these memories from fading into the dark. Don't forget to check out our other videos on the legends of the sky. We'll see you in the next one. Would you like me to look into the training manuals Carroll Smith used for night radar intercepts? Or perhaps the specific radar settings required for those 1944 missions?